In 1991, the United States Navy declassified a listening network that had been operating in secret for 37 years. It was called Project SOSUS, and buried inside 37 years of acoustic data collected by over 1,000 hydrophones stretched across the entire Atlantic and Pacific Ocean floors, were thousands of logged contacts that the Navy's own analysts could not explain. Not Soviet submarines, not geological events, biological contacts, living things. Things large enough to show up on the most sophisticated underwater listening system ever built, moving in patterns that matched no known species. Some of those logs are now public. Most still aren't. Stay with me, because the last creature in this video was recorded by Navy sonar operators for 30 years before marine biology officially confirmed it existed. 30 years of documented contacts with something the scientific establishment said wasn't there. The date science finally admitted it was real, 2003. The creature's name will change how you think about what discovery actually means. Let's start with the network that heard everything and said almost nothing. The Cold War produced a lot of technology that the public didn't know about. Most of it was designed to kill people. Project SOSUS was designed to listen. SOSUS stood for Sound Surveillance System. It was a network of hydrophones, underwater microphones, anchored to the ocean floor in long chains, stretching across the Atlantic and Pacific basins. The concept was straightforward. Low-frequency sound travels extraordinary distances in water, particularly along what oceanographers call the SOFAR channel, the sound fixing and ranging channel, a layer of water at roughly 3,000 feet depth where temperature and pressure combine to create a kind of acoustic highway. A blue whale calling in the North Atlantic can be detected in the South Atlantic. Sound at those frequencies, under those conditions, travels as far as 10,000 miles. The Navy understood this in the 1940s. By 1954, SOSUS was operational. By the 1970s, it covered both ocean basins with a thoroughness that the scientific community, which had no access to it, couldn't have imagined. The system was processing acoustic data from more of the ocean floor than all of marine biology's combined monitoring equipment. And it was picking up things that weren't on the list. The list was submarines. Soviet submarines specifically, but submarines generally. Vessels with propulsion systems, mechanical signatures, predictable behavior for trained analysts. That was the job. And SOSUS was extraordinarily good at it. The network is credited with tracking Soviet submarine movements with a precision that likely altered the strategic calculus of the Cold War in ways that have never been fully declassified. But biological contacts weren't submarines. They didn't have propulsion signatures. They had behavioral variation, the irregular, non-mechanical quality that trained acoustic analysts are specifically taught to recognize as the signature of living organisms. And they were, in several documented cases, large. Not whale large, which the analysts knew how to identify. Something different. When SOSUS was partially declassified in 1991, the biological data came with it. Some of it. Christopher Fox at NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory was among the first civilian scientists to gain access to the declassified hydrophone data. In interviews, he described the experience of going through that archive as, and I'm paraphrasing closely here, like walking into a room full of recordings of things that science had not yet named. The data was clean, the contacts were real, the explanations, in many cases, were absent. Here's what's worth sitting with for a moment. SOSUS operated for 37 years before any civilian scientist saw the biological data. 37 years of ocean acoustics, processed by trained Navy analysts, documenting contacts that the Navy had no biological framework to explain, and no institutional incentive to investigate. Their job was submarines. The biology was noise. The biology was not noise. Here's what's worth understanding about Project SOSUS. It was designed to track Soviet submarines, but the analysts kept logging biological contacts that didn't match any known species. Some of those logs were declassified in 1991. Most weren't. And one of those biological contact types, something that kept appearing in the data, moving, consistent, large, was still being described as unidentified in FOIA-released documents as recently as 2005. We'll come back to what that contact almost certainly was. But first, I want to show you what happens when the Navy builds a listening network and then doesn't know what it's hearing. Because the next case goes further than SOSUS, a lot further. Before we go further, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I've been surprised by where this channel reaches, and I read every single one. Now, what happens when the Navy builds the most sophisticated listening system in history and starts hearing things that aren't on the list? In 1977, a team of scientists from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution descended in the deep-sea submersible Alvin, depth of approximately 8,000 feet in the Galapagos Rift, east of the Galapagos Islands. What they found there rewrote biology. They found hydrothermal vents, cracks in the ocean floor where superheated water, laden with minerals and sulfur compounds, poured out at temperatures that would vaporize you instantly, surrounded by entire ecosystems that had no connection to sunlight. Tube worms 8 feet long, fields of chemosynthetic bacteria, crabs, shrimp, and fish living on chemical energy rather than solar energy. An entire parallel branch of the tree of life, operating on completely different principles from every living thing on Earth's surface. The discovery was described accurately as one of the most significant biological finds of the 20th century. It fundamentally changed our understanding of where life could exist, with implications that extended all the way to the possibility of life on other planets. Here is the part that didn't make the textbooks. Navy submarines had been logging anomalous thermal signatures in those regions since the early 1960s, signatures that, in retrospect, were consistent with what the 1977 Alvin team found. Not at the Galapagos site specifically. Submarine navigation didn't work quite like that. But the thermal anomalies that vent systems produce extend outward and upward in the water column in ways that 1960s naval sonar could detect. The signatures were logged. They were flagged as anomalous. They were not investigated, because investigating geological thermal anomalies was not the Navy's mandate. The window between the first documented Navy thermal signature at vent-adjacent locations and the 1977 Woods Hole discovery was, conservatively, 15 years. 15 years during which a team of biologists with a submersible would have found the most significant biological discovery of the 20th century had anyone connected the thermal data to a research opportunity. No one did, because the data lived in classified operational logs that marine biologists couldn't access. Dr. Robert Ballard, who later became famous for finding the Titanic and who has spent decades working on deep-sea exploration, has spoken publicly about this period. He worked as a Navy consultant during part of the Cold War, which gave him access to submarine survey data that civilian oceanographers didn't have. He has described the frustration of that position clearly. The data that would have accelerated ocean science by decades was sitting in files that the scientific community didn't know existed. Not because anyone was concealing discoveries, because the people collecting the data were not scientists. They were strategic analysts. They had a different job. The hydrothermal vent ecosystems have now been found in over 500 locations worldwide. They are home to organisms, shrimp, tube worms, certain types of bacteria that can survive temperatures, pressures, and chemical environments that would be lethal to virtually all other known life forms. They are, as a class of environment, the most alien place on Earth. The Navy saw the edges of them for 15 years and wrote thermal anomaly, no strategic significance. That is the gap this video is about. The gap is not malice. It is not concealment. It is the distance between what a military sees and what a biologist would see, looking at the same data. That distance is enormous. But thermal anomalies and acoustic contacts are still at some level of abstraction, signals, data points. What comes next is different. Because in one specific case, the gap between institutional knowledge and official science wasn't about data. It was about a creature, a specific animal. One that Navy sonar operators had been encountering for 30 years, and that science spent those 30 years insisting didn't exist. The colossal squid is the perfect example of what we're talking about. Science confirmed it in 2003, but Navy sonar operators had been logging objects matching its acoustic profile since the early 1970s. That's 30 years of officially knowing something was down there. While the scientific community maintained that the largest vertebrate on Earth was either rare to the point of irrelevance or simply not real in the way the sperm whale stomach contents implied. Let's be precise about what we're discussing. Mesonicoteuthis hamiltoni, the colossal squid. Not to be confused with the giant squid, which is a different animal and which we covered in a previous video. The colossal squid is heavier, possibly the heaviest invertebrate in Earth's history. Specimens recovered from sperm whale stomachs suggested a body mass that made the giant squid look like something you'd order at a seafood restaurant. The largest confirmed specimen, recovered in 2007 in the Ross Sea near Antarctica, measured approximately 14 feet and weighed close to 100 pounds. That's the confirmed specimen. The implications of the sperm whale evidence, the size of the beaks found in whale stomachs, the sucker scars on whale skin, point toward individuals potentially twice that size, maybe larger. The colossal squid lives primarily in Antarctic waters, at depths between roughly 3,000 and 7,000 feet. It is a resident of some of the least explored waters on Earth, and it is large enough, dense enough, acoustically reflective enough to produce a sonar return. Navy sonar operators working in the Southern Ocean from the early Cold War period onward logged contacts that didn't fit the profile of any known biological organism and didn't fit the profile of a vessel. The contacts moved. They showed depth variation consistent with vertical migration, something large animals do regularly, moving up to feed at night and returning to depth during the day. They appeared more frequently at certain times of year, which is also consistent with biological behavior. The analysts had a category for these. Unofficially, among themselves, the category was sometimes called biologicals unknown, a designation that appeared in declassified SOSUS logs, and that covered any acoustic contact that was clearly not mechanical and clearly not matching any cataloged species. Biologicals unknown in the Southern Ocean, beginning in the early 1970s. Continuing for decades, science didn't confirm the colossal squid's existence as a real, living, active part of the Antarctic ecosystem until 2003, when researchers captured the first live specimen on film. Before that, its existence was technically supported by evidence, the physical remains in whale stomachs, but the scientific community had no verified live encounter, no behavioral data, no confirmed understanding of what this animal was actually doing in the water column. The Navy had 30 years of its acoustic shadow. If you've made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. If you're not subscribed yet, now is the moment. One click, and YouTube makes sure the next one finds you. Now, what the colossal squid case illustrates is something subtle but important, and it connects directly to the last animal on this list, Dr. Steve O'Shea, a New Zealand-based cephalopod researcher who was among the most prominent scientists working on giant and colossal squid in the late 1990s and early 2000s, described the pre-2003 scientific consensus in terms that are worth quoting carefully. There was acknowledgement that the animal existed, but a systematic underestimation of its range, abundance, and size based on the limited physical evidence available. The beaks in whale stomachs were real. The inference that the animal was a significant ecological presence in Antarctic waters was resisted. The inference was correct. The resistance was institutional. What the colossal squid case illustrates is something subtle but important. Classified data doesn't have to be suppressed to be invisible to science. It just has to exist in a different bureaucratic world. The Navy wasn't hiding the sonar contacts. They simply had no mechanism and no motivation to route that data to marine biologists. And marine biologists had no access to classified sonar archives. The two communities occupied parallel worlds, looking at adjacent phenomena, unable to compare notes. The result was 30 years of delay. 30 years during which the largest invertebrate on Earth existed in scientific darkness, acknowledged in theory, underestimated in practice, and routinely encountered in reality by men operating submarine sonar equipment who filed their contacts under biologicals unknown and moved on. For a moment, let's move away from the enormous and the threatening. Because one of the most striking cases of institutional knowledge running ahead of public science involves something that is not dangerous, not loud, not particularly large. It is beautiful, extravagantly, almost impossibly beautiful. Deep ocean bioluminescence. The biological production of light by marine organisms has been documented in the scientific literature since the late 19th century. It is well established. Roughly 76% of ocean animals are estimated to produce some form of bioluminescence. In the deep ocean, below the reach of sunlight, it may be the primary form of visual communication. What was not publicly documented, and what FOIA requests in the 2000s began to bring into view, was the extent and intensity of bioluminescent activity at certain deep ocean coordinates that Navy sonar and optical systems had been monitoring since the 1960s. Dr. Edith Witter, one of the world's leading experts on deep-sea bioluminescences, and the scientist who led the team that captured the first footage of a live giant squid in its natural habitat in 2004, has spent her career arguing that bioluminescence in the deep ocean is vastly underestimated in scale and ecological importance. In her work, she has described the deep ocean as a world where light is the primary language, where organisms signal, hunt, evade, and reproduce through biological light in a complexity that surface observation cannot fully capture. The bioluminescent case is unusual on this list because what was delayed wasn't information about a creature. It was information about a behavior, a system-level behavior of the deep ocean that changes how you think about what's down there. What comes next is different again, because the final case isn't about delayed discovery or institutional data silos. It's about an animal whose existence was so improbable, so inconsistent with what science thought it knew, that even after the physical evidence appeared, the explanation took years to be accepted. And the place it was first encountered, officially, was not a research vessel. It was a weapons test range. Here's what keeps me coming back to these cases every time I research this subject. We talk about these animals as undiscovered, as if discovery is something that happens to them. As if the megamouth shark, which we're about to discuss, was somehow incomplete until a scientist wrote a paper about it. As if the colossal squid spent 30 years in the Southern Ocean patiently waiting to be confirmed. These animals were not waiting. They were living, hunting, migrating, reproducing, doing every single thing they had been doing for millions of years. In water we visit rarely and understand poorly. The discovery event, the paper, the photograph, the confirmed specimen, that event is about us. It marks the moment our knowledge caught up to a reality that already existed. The ocean didn't change in 2003 when science confirmed the colossal squid. We did. I think that's worth holding on to as we get to this last case. Because the megamouth shark is the clearest illustration of what the logic of institutional blindness actually produces when it finally breaks down. November 15, 1976. Off the coast of Oahu, Hawaii, a United States Navy research vessel is retrieving a sea anchor, a drag device deployed to keep a vessel stable in deep water, that had been sitting at approximately 500 feet below the surface. When they brought it up, there was a shark attached to it. Not in the way a shark might bite a line or investigate a surface object. The shark had been trying to eat the sea anchor. The parachute-like structure of the anchor had apparently triggered the shark's feeding behavior, and the shark, in attempting to filter feed through the parachute material, had become entangled. The shark was 14.7 feet long. It weighed approximately 1,653 pounds. Its most distinctive feature, the one that gave the species its name, was an enormous, rubbery, luminescent mouth, disproportionately large even for a shark of that size, designed for ram filter feeding on zooplankton and small fish in the mesopelagic zone. No scientist had ever seen this animal before. No fisherman had reported it. No specimen existed in any museum collection. No fossil had been connected to it. The megamouth shark, Megachasma pelagios, was, to human knowledge, non-existent until a Navy research vessel accidentally pulled one to the surface. The species was formally described and named in 1983, 7 years after that first encounter. Since 1976, approximately 270 confirmed megamouth munging sightings or captures have been recorded worldwide. That number tells you something specific. This animal is not rare in the way an endangered species is rare. It is rare in the way that deep water animals are rare, infrequently encountered, because its habitat is a depth range that humans rarely visit, and its behavior does not bring it to the surface under normal conditions. The 270 confirmed encounters are not the measure of the population. They are the measure of how often a 15-foot shark chooses to come near the surface in proximity to a human observer. The actual population size is unknown. The geographic range is global. Megamouth sightings have been recorded in the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans. The total depth range of the species is not fully documented. The vertical migration behavior, how deep it goes and how regularly it ascends, is still being studied. Here is the question that the megamouth case raises and that I don't think gets asked clearly enough. If a 15-foot, 600-pound shark could be entirely unknown to science until 1976, what else is down there? Not as a rhetorical question, as an arithmetic one. The megamouth was found by accident, at 500 feet, in the waters of a well-trafficked ocean region near a major U.S. naval installation. It was found because a piece of equipment happened to enter its feeding zone and trigger its behavior. Under any other set of circumstances, if the anchor had been deployed at a different depth, if the current had set it differently, if the shark had simply not been in that particular patch of water that particular day, the megamouth would have remained scientifically unknown. For how much longer? There's no way to know. But the species clearly existed before 1976. Its body plan, its adaptations, its ecological niche, none of these are juvenile features. The megamouth is a fully realized, evolutionarily mature species. It has been what it is for a very long time. We found it because it got its mouth caught on a parachute. Let's bring this together. Project SOSUS ran for 37 years before civilian scientists saw the biological data, and when they did, they found contacts that had no explanation. Hydrothermal vent ecosystems sat at the edges of Navy thermal anomaly logs for 15 years before a research submersible found them and changed. Biology forever. The colossal squid produced sonar returns in the Southern Ocean for 30 years, while the scientific community debated whether it was a significant ecological presence. A species of filter-feeding shark the size of a mid-size RV was completely unknown until 1976. Every one of these cases shares the same architecture. An institution, military, governmental, operational, collects data. The data contains biological information that doesn't fit the institution's categories. The institution logs it, files it, and moves on. The biological reality continues to exist, completely indifferent to the filing system. The gap closes eventually. A declassification, a FOIA request, an accidental catch, a submersible dive in the right place at the right time. The gap closes, and science rushes to catch up to what was, in some sense, already known by the Navy, by the animal, by the water. What I keep thinking about is the shape of what we still haven't closed. If you've made it this far, you already know you're not the kind of person who's satisfied with what's on the surface. Neither am I. There's another video going up this week that picks up exactly where this one leaves off. And if YouTube doesn't know you want to see it, it won't show it to you. One click on subscribe fixes that takes. If this changed how you think about what discovery actually means, type classified below. I read every single one.